Around 6 to 7 years ago, I was studying to become a minister at a conservative Christian college. I had been going to the same church since I was a little kid. Even though it wasn't a super big church, it had about 1,000 members. This church was a huge part of my life. I played the piano for the youth choir, gave sermons at the children's church service, and even drove the church bus to pick up kids who didn't go to church. I did all of this for free, without getting paid back for any of my expenses. During my last year in college, a new guy named Mr. Charming became the Minister of Music, Education and Youth at our church. Everyone thought he was great, especially the church leaders. But the thing is, he turned out to be really bossy. In our first youth group meeting with him, he said he was there to fix the youth group. He liked to say things like, "When I say jump, my followers only get to ask how high and how far." The grown-ups liked him, but the young people didn't. Within a few weeks, almost half of the high school and college students, basically, everyone without parents in the church, stopped coming to church because of him. Most youth directors would have gotten in trouble for this, but he boldly announced during the Sunday morning church service that he had fixed all the issues in the youth group. The pastor and the deacons loved him for it. He quickly set his sights on the pastor's job. Pastor T, who was around 60, became the target of rumors about his health and being too liberal for the church. In our denomination, being seen as liberal is a big problem. Even though the accusations against Pastor T didn't make sense, people kept talking about them. I don't know if the pastor found out, or if he did. Maybe he was too scared to do anything. Unlike some denominations where pastors are assigned by a higher authority, in our church, each congregation chooses its minister. This means pastors have to be careful because any small mistake can cost them their job. Sometimes, even doing the right thing can upset a few people, and that's enough to get you kicked out. Pastor T, like many pastors, could lose not just his job but also his home, as the church often owns the pastor's residence. So if you're out, your whole family becomes homeless and poor. Then I became a target, and I still don't know why. A couple of months after I started working for the church, Mr. Charming called me and said I was no longer needed for youth choir, children's church, bus ministry, or anything else. He didn't even want me to go to the Sunday morning worship service. Later, I found out that Mr. Charming's family members got hired by the church and were getting paid well for the things I used to do for free. His wife earned more for playing a beat-up piano at the youth choir rehearsal than the main organist-pianist got for playing for the adult choir. She could barely play the piano and always seemed bitter and angry, sitting there and glaring without saying much. I was really upset, so I went to Pastor T's office and asked him tearfully what I had done wrong. I couldn't get a clear answer. He just said that people are saying things about me, and that if I wanted a good recommendation for our denomination's ministers' school, I should shut up and do what I'm told. I started asking my church friends what people were saying about me. Every single one said, "I didn't want to tell you, and I don't believe it. But here's what I heard." The rumors said I got my girlfriend pregnant and made her have an abortion. I hadn't had a girlfriend since junior high, and that I got arrested for having marijuana, and my dad had to pay a lot of money to keep it quiet. I didn't even know what pot looked like. There were more rumors, but you get the idea. I did what Pastor T told me to do. I never went back to that church, except once, months later, see below. It hurt a lot. I had been part of that church since I was little, but I needed Pastor T's recommendation to go to the minister's school I wanted, and it was too painful to even drive by there. So I decided to stay away, but I started thinking about Mr. Charming. Someone that mean must have a bad past, and it probably wasn't good. Before working at my church, he worked at a big church in the same denomination in a town about 50 miles away. That church was actually twice as big as mine. So, he moved from a big church to the same job at a smaller church. Was it a bad career move? Was he running away from something? There was something fishy, and it seemed like an opportunity for me. Luckily, one of my uncles and his family lived in that small town, although none of my family went to Mr. Charming's old church. So I called one of my cousins, told her my story, and enlisted her as a co-conspirator. I'll call her Anne. The next Sunday morning, Anne and I attended Sunday school and morning worship at Mr. Charming's old church. Although Anne had never been a member of that church, it was a small town where everyone knew everyone, so she knew most of the people there. She started asking about Mr. Charming and got an earful. Every one of her friends said that Mr. Charming was a world-class creep. He would flirt with, and even make suggestive comments to, all of the girls in the youth group, even those in junior high. He was 40+ years old and had a wife and 3 children of his own. And then there was the touching. Never anything obvious or illegal, but he loved to put his hands all over the young ladies whenever their parents weren't around. But just like at my former church, the adults loved him because he kept the youth in line. Our investigation went on for several weeks. I kept a low profile so as not to arouse suspicion. Mostly I just stood around, ate donuts, drank coffee and talked about football. Anne did most of the work because she knew so many people, and it was perfectly natural for her to attend this church in her hometown, even if it was not the church she usually attended. After church was over, we would go to her house, have a delicious Sunday lunch cooked by my aunt, and then write down everything we had learned. By then Anne's whole family were in on my investigation. They were as angry as I was about the way I'd been treated, and our weekly report made interesting lunchtime conversation. In a few weeks I was pretty sure that if I took a few of these young ladies and their parents, who were friends of my aunt and uncle, to my old church and let them share their stories with the parents of some girls in the youth group, Mr. Charming would lose his job. But things kept getting even more interesting, so Anne and I kept investigating. I really wanted to stay under the radar because I didn't want to make Pastor T any angrier than necessary. He knew a lot of people in the denomination and could easily ruin my career before it even began. After about a month, Anne pulled me aside and said, "You have to hear this." She introduced me to a well-dressed big guy, maybe 30-35 years old. Let's call him Fred. We went to a Sunday school room where no one could overhear us. It turned out that Mr. Charming had been having a secret relationship with Fred's wife for several years. When Fred found out, he stayed calm, consulted with a lawyer, and spent months collecting evidence. There were text messages, voicemails, emails, even photos and videos with Fred's wife and Mr. Charming. Apparently, Mr. Charming enjoyed watching videos of himself and Fred's wife and would send them to her. They both engaged in cyber sex through texts. Later, they would meet in person and make more videos. Finally, Fred talked to his wife about everything. She tried to deny it, but the evidence was too clear. Fred decided he wanted a divorce, full custody of the kids, their house, his retirement money, his business, her engagement and wedding rings, everything, even the dog. She hired a lawyer, but in this rural Bible Belt county, the lawyer told her that if the judge saw the videos, she might end up in a homeless shelter with all her stuff in a garbage bag under her bunk. Then Fred turned his attention to Mr. Charming. Fred truly loved his wife and believed that Mr. Charming intentionally ruined their marriage. Going through the court system, suing for loss of consortium, and making Mr. Charming legally miserable would take too long. This is the rural Deep South, where people prefer a more straightforward approach. In these counties, the police and any jury of your peers probably include people who have known you since kindergarten. So, if you have good reasons for your actions and you're not too foolish about it, there are things you can do. Fred set up a meeting with Mr. Charming in his church office. Mr. Charming had no idea because Fred was a deacon and his kids were in the church youth group. Remember I mentioned Fred was big? He was at least 6 feet 6 inches, 300 pounds, and if there was an inch of fat on him, he hid it well. He looked like he could uproot a 100-foot oak tree without breaking a sweat. Fred told me he brought several friends with him and, of course, the videos. One friend blocked the door. Another unplugged the phone. A third one stood behind Mr. Charming and encouraged him to stay seated in his chair. Fred made Mr. Charming watch about 10 minutes of one of the videos. Then he calmly said, "I'm going to stand here and watch you pack up your stuff. After that, you're going to leave this place and never come back to this town again, or we'll be back." Mr. Charming did what he was told. A month later, he got a new job at another church, my old church, and started causing problems for a whole new group of people, including me. Fred didn't know where Mr. Charming had gone. He was led to believe that Mr. Charming had moved to another state. He was surprised, pleased, and angry to find out that this guy was only 50 miles away. This all happened a few months ago. Fred was still deeply in love with his wife. They were getting counseling, and he hoped they could save his marriage. But his hatred for Mr. Charming was still growing. It was like Mount St. Helens right before it exploded. He showed a face of controlled anger and revenge that scared me, even though I wasn't the one he was angry with. The next day, Monday, I drove back there and gave him a copy of my old church's directory. It had home addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses for pretty much every member of the church. I showed him the pages listing all the deacons and other church leaders. I marked some of the church's major financial donors. I told Fred about my situation with Pastor T and asked him not to mention my name. "No problem," he said. The next Sunday, I couldn't resist going to my old church to see what was happening. Mr. Charming wasn't there, and no one explained what had happened to him. One strange thing, though, the pastor looked really scared. His voice, which is usually strong and loud, was shaky throughout the whole sermon. I sneaked in just before the service started and made sure to sit in the front row, center pew. The pastor's face when he saw me was priceless. I didn't know it then, but Fred had been working hard and did a thorough job. The entire church received several anonymous emails with photos and videos of Mr. Charming and Fred's wife in various compromising situations. Deacons and major donors got emails and express mail packages just to make sure. Mr. Charming and Pastor T were left out. They didn't know anything until the phone calls started coming in. After the service, my church friends quickly figured out why I was there. It felt really good. I became a bit of a hero, even though I kept saying I had no idea what they were talking about. Things kept getting messy at my old church for months. Both Pastor T and the pastor of Mr. Charming's old church almost lost their jobs because they lied to the committee of deacons at my old church. This committee recommended hiring Mr. Charming, but were misled about why he left his previous job. Somehow, both pastors managed to stay in their roles, but a lot of people left my old church, causing financial problems. There was talk about taking legal action for sending unwanted explicit content to older ladies and others in the church. But they couldn't prove that Fred did it. I don't think they tried very hard because his wife was in the videos and photos. Both churches really didn't want this to go to court because Mr. Charming's affairs and the fact that he spent years involved with a deacon's wife while having unsupervised access to many church youth would become public knowledge. So they kept it quiet. I never saw Pastor T again. I had lost all trust and respect for him, and I was sure he figured out my connection to the whole mess. So my chances of having a preaching career in my denomination were pretty much zero. By that time, being a pastor, like Pastor T, was the last thing I wanted anyway. I withdrew my application to minister's school and eventually earned a doctorate in archaeology at a different grad school, magna cum laude. I've been teaching at a large public university in the Midwest of the USA, with summer jobs on archaeological digs in Europe, and I am very happy. One last, very satisfying event. The reason for this post. All of that happened 6 to 7 years ago. Fast forward to last March. I went to pick up a friend at a large downtown urban bus station in the US. Everyone hates this place. Not only is it crowded, but it is poorly maintained and dirty. It smells like spoiled garbage mixed with diesel exhaust and seldom cleaned public restrooms. My friend's bus was running late, so I went to the newsstand to get a soda and candy bar. Guess who was restocking the shelves? Mr. Charming. I just sat across from the newsstand and enjoyed my drink and snack. He saw me, then turned away. I just sat and watched him, restocking shelves full of adult magazines and junk food. Revenge is a feast that is best enjoyed cold. Reader comment. This resonates with me because my parents' Southern Baptist Church almost hired a guy to be their new senior pastor, Their local newspaper found out he left his previous job at a bigger church after getting caught having inappropriate relationships with former members of his youth group while he was married. Even in medium-sized towns, newspaper exposés get attention. Original poster. I had decided never to go back to that church, except for that one Sunday described in my post. But, through friends who were still members of the church, I kept up with all the chaos, hypocrisy and damage control spin that happened because of me and Fred. There's a lot more, but it would make the post too long. It was delightful to watch, though. Reader comment: I wouldn't mind seeing a part 2. Original poster. Thanks. It took me a few months to gather enough emotional strength to write this much. Note that I last saw Mr. Charming in March, 4 months ago. This whole situation, being kicked out of the church I devoted my life to, Pastor T's rejection for no apparent reason, etc., are the most painful experiences of my life. It wasn't Mr. Charming. I knew he was a sociopath the moment I first saw him. But the hurtful rejection by people I loved and thought loved me goes very deep. Reader comment: I don't hold it against anyone for having faith, and I completely understand the pain of being mistreated by your faith community. I'm still curious, what effect has this experience, time, and a career in archaeology had on your beliefs, if any? Original poster. My PhD in archaeology didn't touch on religion or the Bible. I earned it at a state university in the USA. But I used those skills to examine the archaeological evidence for the Bible, and it marked the end of my belief in the Bible as literal truth. There simply isn't any evidence supporting what you find in the Pentateuch, Joshua, or Judges. How did millions of Israelites live for 38 years in Kadesh Barnea and leave no archaeological evidence? A detailed discussion of this goes beyond the possibilities of this post. But if you're curious, it's worth looking into further. Reader comment: You're not alone in that. Many LDS elders have spent their lives searching for archaeological proof of the stories in the Book of Mormon, only to find none and lose their faith. Original poster. I didn't lose my faith. I didn't lose anything except blind devotion to deliberately made-up stories, pushed by self-serving conmen, ministers who know they're lying. I gained enlightenment. Reader comment: I'm glad you found enlightenment. It's sad that the people you thought were genuine turned out to be cruel hypocrites, especially that they abandoned you when you needed them. It sounds like they were also taking some money from the church by paying high salaries to friends and family for jobs you did out of love and devotion to your church. People like that are awful. I'm glad you've moved away from that group. Original poster. You're right about the skimming. There was actually a lot more than I put in my post. I left out some stuff that wasn't really relevant because the post was already too long. I will say, though, that Mr. Charming and his group weren't the only ones skimming, and a significant amount of skimming happened before he arrived and after he left. Glad I'm out. Reader comment: Sorry, OP. I went through a similar situation a few years ago. It's surprising to see people you thought were your friends follow a charming narcissist or sociopath. In the end, I realized those former friends weren't the kind of people I wanted or needed in my life. Original poster. One of the best things about leaving my old faith was finding out who my real friends are. My true friends cared about me no matter what I believed or didn't believe. Everyone else was never really my friend. Reader comment: You might want to check out the Vatican archives if possible. There's a lot of active archaeology related to various texts, and the Bible itself is a limited resource for such research, being essentially a greatest hits compilation. Not necessarily a reason to be religious, but more to see where text and evidence intersect. Original poster. Thanks for the info. I hope much of it is online, so I don't have to go all the way to Rome, though I'd love to. Although Mr. Charming's former church was in a small, rural town, my former church, the subject of most of my post, is in a major city. Reader comment: Sorry, OP, that you went through that. It'll take a while for the pain to subside, but kudos to you for standing up. Hugs and high fives. Original poster. Thanks. I don't miss religion, the mind control. but I do miss having a regular Sunday morning time with friends. I still get to spend a lot of time with them, and it's better because we don't have to listen to a sermon, and nobody tries to guilt us into giving them money. Reader comment: why is being a liberal in church a kiss of death? Wasn't Jesus a liberal socialist? Original poster. Most churches don't want you to act like Jesus. It makes them look bad. Being liberal in church can get you kicked out or isolated faster than almost anything. It happened to me twice, once with a church and once with a parachurch group. Reader comment: I don't suppose their position was that all people needed to remember was Micah 6:8. Original poster. Micah 6:8 says, He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. I followed that imperfectly, but as best I could, for over 20 years in that church. As described in my post, it didn't end well. I was treated as disposable. Reader comment: great revenge story. Did you ever get back in touch with Fred? In a way, Fred got his final revenge on Mr. Charming. Original poster. Fred and I do communicate, usually via email, a few times a year. We're friends, although not very close due to the geographical distance. I am in the Midwest, and he is in the Deep South. I showed my original Reddit post to Fred before posting it to make sure I remembered everything correctly, and that he was okay with me sharing it. When I mentioned seeing Mr. Charming in the bus station to Fred, he was glad that Mr. Charming was no longer in religious work. Fred doesn't claim credit for ruining Mr. Charming's life. He believes, and I agree, that Mr. Charming destroyed his own life. Fred simply told people the truth about what Mr. Charming was doing. Fred and his wife are still married, and as per him, she has been faithful since Mr. Charming left their lives. While he holds Mr. Charming more responsible than his wife for her adulterous relationship, it took years of marriage counseling to rebuild trust. Fred is one of the most loving and forgiving people I've ever met. Personally, I might have chosen to divorce her. Fred and I exchange texts or emails a few times a year, and occasionally have a phone call. He called to congratulate me when I earned my doctorate. Fred has a high school education, maybe some junior college, and not a trace of jealousy in his character. He's a really nice guy. However, managing his family responsibilities and his small business, where he's known for being conscientious and honest, along with my commitments to grad school and teaching and occasional travel, make it challenging for us to have a close relationship. Maybe in the future, when our lives are less busy, we can find time for a deeper friendship. I think it would be a good one. You're right about Fred, not his real name. He's a loyal friend and one of the most genuine people you'll ever meet. By the way, he chose to forgive his wife and stay married. They've gone through a lot of counseling to rebuild trust, and Mr. Charming is avoiding Ms. Fred out of fear. They're working hard to make their marriage work. Reader comment: I have a feeling you were at the downtown Birmingham Greyhound station. Original poster. Sorry, I can't provide specific geographic information. Over the past few years, I've shared my experience with many friends from all over the USA. My situation being expelled from a religious group for no apparent reason, just so an unpleasant Christian leader can instill fear in the rest of his disciples, is not uncommon. So really, it could have happened anywhere and has. Reader comment: honestly, I thought it was the same Greyhound station. It's really tough not to picture that place when someone describes it that way. I've only been there once, and I hope I never have to go there again. But I'm not far from Birmingham, and I'm really curious about which church this might have been. Original poster. That's the intriguing part of my post. It could have been any one of many churches, right? Let's just say this church is still thriving and making a lot of money. Reader comment: this easily could have been my old church. My family was pushed out of a church, and to the best of my knowledge, it was all because I was a quirky kid who got bullied. My parents sent me to another church's VBS because I had cousins there. People can be terrible. People in Baptist churches can be really terrible. I've known some good Baptist individuals, but I've never seen a good Baptist church. Original poster, I agree. I've known several people in my denomination who were good individuals, but the denomination itself seems to bring out the worst in people, and the problem worsens as you go up the hierarchy. People in the pews are, generally, better than the deacons. Deacons are better than ministers in small churches. Ministers in small churches are better than ministers in large churches, and so on. I vividly remember when I realized this. It was a few months after I left the church in my post, and I was in the process of leaving Christianity altogether. It struck me like a bucket of ice water. The more a person dedicated their life to Jesus as a minister, etc., the worse person they became. If Christianity were true, ministers should generally be better Christians than non-ministers, though not always. This realization was powerful evidence for me that there was something seriously wrong with Christianity. While it wasn't the only factor that changed my mind, it did encourage me to keep examining the facts, leading to the well-deserved demise of my former beliefs. Reader comment: I felt sorry for Pastor T until the "shut up and do what you're told" nonsense. Original poster: I still don't understand that part. What did he gain by throwing me under the bus? I cared for him as much as my own parents. He was the reason I believed I was called to the ministry. Mr. Charming, despite all the hurtful things he did, didn't really harm me. I knew he was a sociopath the first time I saw him. He had the look, but I had loved, trusted, adored, and obeyed Pastor T since I was a small child. I felt disposable. It still hurts. Reader comment: I wonder if Pastor T was accustomed to types like Charming. He seems to have the enabler role down pat. I mean, who lies to bring a guy to your church who messed with the old church's deacon's wife and torch young girls? If nothing else, wouldn't you be worried about what he'd do to your wife? And then his deacons start to worship the dude, and Pastor T says nothing. The rumor mill starts about Pastor T, and he still says nothing. Then he wants you to stay silent too. Makes you wonder how young Pastor T got his position and how many times he said nothing to get and stay where he is. Original poster: I didn't have a say in hiring Mr. Charming since I wasn't a deacon. However, based on talks with a couple of deacons who remained my friends even after I left the church, it seems Mr. Charming's old pastor knew the real reasons he left. There was a lot of intentional deception to get him hired at my former church. I know this because Fred shared that he had a meeting with his pastor, revealing why Mr. Charming quit suddenly and the meeting didn't end well. When the deacons at my church were deciding on hiring Mr. Charming, they all received a glowing letter of recommendation from Mr. Charming's Fred's church pastor. So at least Mr. Charming and his pastor lied. As for Pastor T, I can't be certain. In my denomination, sexual immorality among professional Christians is common, so it's possible Pastor T knew and didn't care. Mr. Charming was skilled at whipping the youth group in line, something Pastor T and the deacons wanted. We were learning to think for ourselves, which scared them. Reader comment: The saddest parts are how easily the congregation believed rumors and how messed up Pastor T's priorities are. It seems he didn't like a vocal youth group. Having trust shattered like that must have been traumatic. T didn't gain anything but scandal and financial troubles. I'm glad you moved on and found new passions. Original poster: Thanks for your kind words. Mr. Charming's treatment of me was terrible, but it didn't really hurt me because I, along with all my friends in the church youth college group, realized he was a sociopath the moment we saw him. He had the look. However, Pastor T's treatment hurt like hell. I loved, trusted, and admired him as much as my own parents. I might never get over that in the sense that it won't hurt when I think about it. Still, I've moved on to a happier life, and a lot of healing has happened. I disagree with one thing you said, though. T didn't gain anything from it but a scandal and financial troubles. Pastor T is still the pastor at my former church. When Fred exposed everything, Pastor T had to do significant damage control to keep his job. He wasn't overly careful about who he hurt in the process. I didn't include it in my original post because it was already too long, and since I was gone, it was information I heard but did not witness directly. For me, it just confirmed that my decision not to go to minister's school was the right one. I couldn't live with myself if I had to do the kinds of things Pastor T did to survive. Reader comment: keeping your current position isn't a gain, but yeah, this really showed his true face in rather disturbing clarity. Like you, I could never live like this. Who walks over the bodies of victims for a living, while preaching about the extreme opposite too? The cognitive dissonance required for this alone, let alone the murder of your conscience. For what it's worth, I think you really dodged a bullet. Somehow, you still ended up with the pain because humans can be so shitty. Original poster. That's what I keep telling myself. Even though I paid a high price for this knowledge, it's better to see these people as they really are while I'm still young enough to change directions in my life without too much disruption. It could have been worse. I have an uncle, a now former conservative minister, who didn't figure this out until he was 40 plus. Then he realized he had a wife and children to support, but his only marketable skill was lying for a living. Luckily, we have a very large, close-knit family who came to his aid and helped him with a career change. It was still several difficult years, but he's now happily employed as a clinical psychologist. A couple of years after his career change, he told us that if it hadn't been for our family, he would have self-deleted himself. I don't think he was kidding. One of my closest conservative Christian friends from my childhood became a foreign missionary. He came home on furlough and put a shotgun in his mouth. Reader comment: that's dark. Yeah, I can see people self-deleting over this. It doesn't help that it's usually men or male-presenting trans, non-binary peeps who become professional Christians. I love that term of yours. Christianity has this toxic idea of men being the sole provider, the only financial earner, and having to be perfect and in charge all the time. Doesn't leave much room for error. Original poster. Liberal Christian churches understand that ministers may want to change careers, whether their beliefs change or not. Many of them actively support them in this process. The Episcopal Church in the USA even has a whole department dedicated to handling such transitions. However, conservative Christian denominations often make pastors feel like they have failed God, going out of their way to overwhelm them with feelings of guilt, inadequacy, failure, and depression if they consider leaving their pastoral role. The more I reflect on Bible-believing Christianity, the more it seems anti-human to me. I'm so glad I'm out. Reader comment: wow. And the nerve of your pastor and fellow church members, who had probably known you your whole life, to believe the word of a guy they had known for a whole 5 minutes. Original poster. Mr. Charming was very sophisticated in spreading these rumors. They never directly traced back to him, but rather to his children, his wife, a few people from his former church, and even Pastor T's wife, who was self-righteous. I believe Pastor T took Mr. Charming's side in kicking me out because he was afraid of losing his own job. Somehow he thought throwing me under the bus would somehow appease the situation. Really, it doesn't make any sense. Reader comment: well, he hit all the right notes to get someone kicked out of a conservative church. The only one he missed was saying you were gay. Original poster. There was a lot of other stuff in the rumor mill about me that I'm too embarrassed to include in a post, even anonymously. Although back then I would have been horrified for anyone to think I was gay, it wouldn't bother me at all today, even though I happen to be straight. But some of the other stuff was just repulsive, and many people at the church believed it without asking me or considering any evidence to the contrary. Reader comment: sounds like this guy saved you from the insanity that would have been life in the Baptist church. You should have thanked him. Not that academia isn't a little crazy. Original poster. I definitely thanked Fred, repeatedly, but I will never thank Mr. Charming. While there is a sense in which he did me a favor by revealing the true nature of people in the ministry, 2 pastors and himself, if you read all of my responses, I had invested my entire life in that church. I loved that church and the people in it. I trusted them. They were my family, God's forever family, just as much as my mom and dad. But he kicked me out by spreading rumors that I had gotten my girlfriend pregnant and she had had an abortion. I'd been arrested for possession of marijuana and other stuff that I'm too embarrassed to post, even anonymously. Scars like that don't heal quickly. My entire childhood and youth church experience, 20 years, is now bittersweet because of him, and it was completely unprovoked. To this day, I have no idea what I did to upset this guy. Some people from his former church, Fred's church, where he worked for several years, told my cousin that he would occasionally do this to one of his disciples, apparently at random, just to show the rest of his disciples that he had the power to do so. Reader comment: so insane. Hope you're happier now. Original poster: much happier. Unchurched, non-religious, able to think. I'd rather have questions that cannot be answered than answers that cannot be questioned. Richard Feynman, reader. Comment: you didn't do anything. He simply needed reasons to justify removing you from the things you did for free, so he could hire his people at pay. Just firing you and hiring them would have looked sketchy, but if you were a bad person, then obviously you would have to go. That's all. Original poster. I've put Mr. Charming's evil behind me. But Pastor T's rejection and mistreatment of me still hurts like hell, though. I loved, trusted, and respected Pastor T as much as my own father, maybe more. But to him, I was disposable. When it was in his self-perceived interest to throw me under the bus, he did not hesitate to do so. I seriously hope I never see him again. I'm not sure what I would do if I did. Reader comment: you sensed a sociopath. He sensed you'd seen through him. Original poster. Probably so. I was really trying to hide it. But maybe I wasn't as good an actor as I thought I was. Reader comment: Charming decided to play a stupid game and win himself a stupid prize. In any case, OP, I'm sorry all your hard work at your church was all for naught. But the way you got your revenge was extremely satisfying. Nice one. Original poster. I know this is the pro-revenge subreddit, and what I did might seem like revenge, but my main goal was to prevent him from hurting others as he had hurt me. He didn't hurt me personally. I could tell he was a sociopath the first time I saw him. However, he influenced people in the church, like Pastor T, to do very hurtful things to me and others I cared about. Was he a truly evil, corrupting force? Or did he merely help reveal the true nature of secretly bad people? It's a challenging question, and I'm still grappling with the answers. But the way Pastor T treated me feels like a deep, jagged, infected wound. There were no winners in this situation. I lost a church family I loved, discovering that for my entire life I had loved them, and they had never loved me. And I wasn't the only one hurt. Many others, though not directly relevant to the story, experienced similar pain, which I didn't include in my original post. Reader comment: I know I'm a day late and $1 short, and I'm not sure if this will help soothe the pain, but I'm willing to bet my soul that Mr. Charming found some dirt on Pastor T as well, and was blackmailing him to make it easy to get rid of you. The entire time I was reading your post, I was questioning why your pastor would dismiss you so easily after your time dedicated to the church, in which there have been no complaints about you. If you ever want to chat, hit me up. I also dedicated my life to religion only to have the rug pulled out from under me due to hypocritical, abusive people. Your story speaks volumes, and I wish I was able to pull off even a modicum of revenge as beautifully as this. Original poster, interesting theory. In 7 years I've never thought of that. I don't know if it would ease my feelings, even if Pastor T spent the first 20 years of my life expressing love in a non-inappropriate, agape way, and demanding the same in return, only to treat me poorly just to protect himself from blackmail. But it would clarify some things. After the Mr. Charming incident, Pastor T almost lost his job due to hiring Mr. Charming. The rumor mill then turned against Pastor T, leading to some terrible things being said. Many people left the church, causing financial difficulties and more. I didn't include these details in my original post because it was a different story about different people, mainly Pastor T. Also, my post was already too long. Crucially, I had no way to independently confirm most of the rumors about Pastor T. I don't care about him, but I have enough integrity to avoid falsely slandering someone, even if they're a world-class scumbag. I was no longer attending that church and was trying to move on, so what I heard was second, third, or fourth hand through friends. Unfortunately, a few rumors did seem true, and they aren't pleasant. If I can find a way to make them interesting, I might share them in another thread for everyone to see. It's an interesting theory, and it would explain a lot. Pastor T seemed scared when we met privately in his office more than a month before everything blew up. He told me to shut up and do what you're told. I was sure he wasn't scared of me, but I never knew what he was scared of. Reader comment. While I'd say revenge isn't the Christian way, what happens in the dark eventually comes to light. This guy did a lot of things in the dark. It's unfortunate your community turned on you due to lies, but I hope you were able to salvage some relationships. I had lies spread about me a few months back, lost many friends until some came to hear my side. The ones spreading the lies eventually confessed publicly, and while I was accepted back into the group, it never felt the same. There will always be that shadow of doubt, even though they heard the truth from the person who spread the lies. Original poster. One positive outcome of this whole sordid episode is that it revealed who my true friends are. The ones who knew the rumors were false stuck with me, and I'm still friends with most of them. Reader comment. I really can't imagine why someone trying to reconcile with his wife would send candid videos of her extramarital sex life to another group of total strangers. Original poster. I've kept up with Fred, not his real name, since the events described in my post. We still exchange texts and Facebook messages a few times a year. He is one of the nicest, most mild-mannered guys you'd ever meet, except when it came to Mr. Charming. I can't provide specific information, but he eventually chose to forgive his wife, and they are still married. Rebuilding that trust was a much more difficult task. He claims she has been faithful since then. Apparently, Mr. Charming targeted her, and no one else has been able to. Reader comment. That's not something I would do. If a girl cheats on me, the relationship is over. Forever. Original poster. Me too. I could never trust her again. But Fred deeply loved his wife. He's a great guy with a huge heart. They have had a lot of struggles, but he says she's been faithful since Mr. Charming got out of the picture. I hope so. For Fred's sake. He's one of the most compassionate men I've ever met. Like a grizzly bear with a heart the size of a whale. Reader comment. This is beautiful. My entire family is Catholic, and I was raised very Catholic. My husband was raised very Southern Baptist. Granddaddy is a preacher. The only people I know more hypocritical than Catholics are Southern Baptists. Original poster, yes. At least Catholics will say hello when they see each other in the liquor store. Reader comment. As someone involved in ministry, I apologize for how poorly you were treated in a place where that sort of behavior should be unacceptable. I hope you can find a better church that actually practices what it preaches. Original poster, nah. I gave up on church and religion. 2 reasons. A doctorate in archaeology pretty much blows away any ideas about the reliability of the Old Testament. Non-Christians are nicer people. Reader comment. Don't think there was ever any revenge on my youth minister, but I remember he disappeared quickly one day, and for the next few years, female friends of mine from that youth group admitted that he had been really creepy to them, including cornering them alone and touching them. Original poster. This was the second youth director in a row at that church who had left quickly, and career changed immediately afterward. But the previous one was just lazy and stupid, not sexually perverted as far as I know. I remember having a serious discussion with him about whether human blood was red or blue. He pointed to the veins in his arm and said, "Look, it's blue. It just turns red when you expose it to air." There are 2 kinds of stupid. The kind where Mother Nature is just unkind to you, and the kind where you work hard at it. He had the second kind. It was the only thing he was good at. Reader comment. Yeah, looking back, I don't know why I looked up to these people. I actually went into ministry for 15 years before getting fed up with the hypocrisy and left the church altogether. Original poster. So you were a minister for 15 years, then left? What are you doing now? Reader comment. I was a worship leader. Transitioned that into a secular band that was relatively successful before the pandemic. Now I'm collecting unemployment and waiting until 2021 to get back on the road. It's tough right now, not gonna lie. But I'm way happier than I was in church. Original poster. I wish you every success. Sounds like you have had a difficult path, but you're handling everything with wisdom and strength. Reader comment. I can tell why T's wife radiated bitterness and repressed anger if she was shackled to somebody like that. Original poster. Actually, it was Mr. Charming's wife, not Pastor T's wife. Sorry, I did not make this clear in my OP. Pastor T's wife was a piece of work too. I don't know where they found a corn cob big enough to cram up her butt. Most repressed person I've ever met. I have some interesting stories about her too, maybe in a future post. I'm pretty sure Mr. Charming's wife knew why Mr. Charming had to leave Fred's church. So yes, she was pissed, but trapped. She had no job skills and 3 children. Reader comment. Well written, well executed, and a good read. A particular youth pastor used to be very condescending and snarky toward me when I was a teen. I'm not sure if his disdain for me was the fact I went to a HS most of the kids didn't go to, or some other reason. I'd been an outsider and loner all my life. Church was the one place I should have felt welcome. Years later, that youth pastor got the same job at a church in Florida. He ended up marrying one of the girls from his youth group 6 months after she turned 18. They had 3 kids, and eventually he became a pastor at some church in California. About 2 years into his leadership of that church, an underage neighbor with learning disabilities claimed she had been having an affair with the guy. He swore up and down nothing had happened and that it was all a lie. He got his parents to have everyone pray that the situation would be rectified. His parents mortgaged their house to pay for a decent lawyer. Finally, his lawyer told him straight up. The evidence was overwhelming. His best shot was to fess up and plead guilty. He got about a decade in the California prison system before release, after which he moved back to my hometown. What I'd never told anyone back then, and what he didn't know, was I had been a victim from the age of 6 to 12. So while I already didn't like the guy, after he did what he did, I loathed him. A few years ago, I was getting some lunch at a fast food restaurant and saw him 2-3 places in front of me. Some lady with her little girl was waiting for their food, and I told the mom to watch her child carefully. A registered offender was in our presence. He mouthed off to me. I mouthed off to him. We went outside. He didn't have much to say 5 minutes later, but any hint of snarky condescension was gone. At any rate, I'm Presbyterian. You were predestined to get to do archaeological digs in Europe. I am so envious. Not be a pastor. Or I'm sorry you had to deal with that. But you have learned that believers following the man and not the maker is a recipe for disaster. Glad he got his comeuppance. God bless. Original poster. I'm so sorry that you had this terrible experience. I don't know what to say except that I'm glad that you had the chance and the courage to confront this creep. I hope it helped. Reader comment. It's all good, I assure you. I am saddened you were forced to leave your home church due to that pastor. My mom was on a pulpit committee to find a new pastor many years ago. There was turmoil and a falling out, so my mom stopped going there. She went to a different church the rest of her life, and I often went with her. But I have never felt like that was my church. You understand, I'm sure. We all need to get right with the Almighty, especially with whatever happens in November looming. I need to look for a church for me and get back to living my beliefs. Your story encouraged me to do that. So I thank you. Original poster. Actually, I did keep my conservative Christian beliefs for a while after leaving the church. But a few semesters into grad school, studying archaeology, I started applying my grad school skills to the whole question of the reliability of the Bible, and my beliefs took a decidedly more agnostic turn. I still like some of the things that the Bible says that Jesus said, like, love your neighbor, unless he is Mexican or black and living the Bible Belt. But archaeologically, you just can't believe in a literal Bible. Just too many problems. Maybe you'd be happier if you took a deep look into the scientific, logical, and archaeological basis for your beliefs. It helped me escape from a lot of mistaken assumptions. Reader comment. Well, in all honesty, I still have my beliefs. I've just applied science, which I also believe in the equation, like the billions of years that it took to create the universe versus 6 days. The Bible doesn't say days for whom. There is some verse in the Bible that says a day to God is like 1,000 human years. That's an analogy, of course. But I don't think early man could have conceived of billions of years. When Cain was kicked out of the garden and was worried others would kill him, when there were supposedly 3 people on Earth, I think those people were the Neanderthals and other not fully human species. I could give other examples, but that isn't important. You're at peace believing what you do, as am I. Your post inspired, even if it was in a way you didn't intend, and it caused me to sin via jealousy. I love Europe, having been a few times to many countries. Actually getting to assist on a dig there would be so cool. I love history. If you ever need free labor to take the heaps of sifted dirt away, let me know. I'd be proud just to be a member of any team like that. Reader comment. Now that most of the pertinent comments about your post have been made, I just wanted to ask, what country, i.e., have you done archaeological work in, and what regions in those countries? Sorry, you telling me that has had me curious for days. Original poster. I really can't get too specific because it's a small world, and I really don't want everyone to figure out who I am. I teach adjunct and postdoc non-tenure track. Ain't much, but times are hard, at a state university in a pretty conservative area, and any discussion of religion, except blind faith is good, subjects me to risks that I don't want to hassle with. But, in the USA, most of my work has been in Eastern Virginia, 18th and early 19th century. For the past few summers, except this one damn virus, I've been able to go to England and work on some pre-Roman Celtic stuff. If you go to eBay.com and search on England ancient Celtic coin, without quotes, you will find stuff similar to what we found. Not actually what I dug up, similar to. Any ancient Roman or Celtic stuff from an archaeological site has this huge approval process that you have to go through to determine whether a museum wants it, or they can let you have it if ever. Takes years. Reader comment. Very nice. I'm in the southeastern US myself, so I'm familiar with the coastal Commonwealth area. Majorly impressed with the England work too. I think I need some advice in an attempt to ease my conscience, and I thought you might be able to help. When I was a child, I was in a choir that toured all over the world and sang at the White House, among other places. When I was 12, I went to Greece for about 6 weeks. We visited less touristy places and had access to areas that regular tourists rarely see. While touring the site of Delphi, I noticed something sticking out from under a rock. I moved the rock and found what I thought was an odd-looking rock, so I put it in my pocket. Adults were searched when we left, but kids weren't. Long story short, when I washed the rock off, I realized it's a piece of pottery with little bits of paint remaining. What would you recommend as the best way for me to return it? I doubt it's of major historical importance, but I shouldn't have taken it. Yet I wouldn't want some person at the Athens post office to lose it either. I want to make sure it gets back home. Original poster. It's very admirable that you want to return this pottery. But you're right. It's almost certainly not archaeologically significant, and it wouldn't have been even if an expert had excavated and catalogued it. I know I keep referring to eBay, but go there and search for ancient Greek pottery without quotes. You can buy stuff like you described for just a few dollars. Heck, you can buy an entire bowl in beautiful condition for a few hundred. I have a big curio cabinet at my mum's house, since I relocate so much, full of exquisite fossils, ancient Roman glass, Egyptian faience, etc. that I've bought on eBay. Really, that stuff is all over Eurasia, and if you sink a shovel into any random place between Ireland and Japan, you have a significant chance of finding something. We don't understand that here in the US because artifacts are much less common here, but people have been living in Eurasia and throwing stuff away for 100,000 years. So my advice is to keep it and not feel guilty. There's a special significance to archaeological discoveries that you dig up yourself, which goes far beyond their cash value. It is an emotional treasure that cannot be described by any price. It has a unique value to you. If you still feel guilty, look up similar items for sale online, on eBay and other places. Find several examples of ancient pottery shards like yours. They don't have to be the same style, just similar in size and glazing. Then make an educated guess about how much your shard would sell for on the open market, like on eBay. After that, find a Greek charity or any charity you like and send them a check for that amount. Attach a letter explaining your gift if you want. I've done similar things about my past actions, and it usually takes care of the problem. It only works if you can't actually fix the original problem, though, which I don't think you can in this case. So it should work for you. Reader comment. Well, if that's the case, I think I will keep it. I have ancient Greek coins I bought there, as well as some coins I bought in Hong Kong from the Ming Dynasty. You are correct. I have a site that sells antiquities bookmarked on my laptop, so I know what you say is true. I just remember the Greeks complaining about much of the Parthenon frieze being at the Louvre in Paris. They're antiquities in another country. Yet I did the same thing. Thanks for the response. Peace. Original poster. I don't really think you did the same thing. First of all, you were a child, not a professional thief, also known as a dealer in antiquities of unknown provenance. Second, and most importantly, the Parthenon frieze is of enormous, unique archaeological, historical, and artistic importance. Your shard has sentimental value to you, but not much to anyone else. You can't buy the Parthenon frieze on eBay, but you can buy shards. By the way, if you're ever in Nashville, Tennessee, there's a full-size, completely detailed replica of the Parthenon in Centennial Park, just north of Vanderbilt University. It's one of the most interesting things to see in Nashville, in my opinion, if you're into that kind of thing. Also, it has some of the best country music you'll hear anywhere if you're a fan, as I am. Reader comment. That encounter at the end was the cherry on the top. Original poster, yep, golden, platinum. I had lost all contact with him, and the rumor was that he had left the state and moved to the West Coast. I had tried Googling him without success. The look on his face told it all. He was as broken a man as I'd ever seen. I'd have felt sorry for him, except for all of the pain that he had deliberately caused to so many good people I knew. I was really tempted to choke him right then and there in front of all those witnesses. But I decided that that would be too good for him. Let him live and suffer the consequences of his actions for the rest of his life. Plus, face it, 20 years to life was a bit of a deterrent. Unless I could come up with a jury-pleasing, he needed killing argument, which sometimes actually works in the Deep South. Reader comment. Thank you for an amazing story. I keep on wondering what drives evil people like Mr. Charming. Original poster. I don't understand either. Someone with his kind of talent and charm could easily be hugely successful as a minister or any of dozens of other careers. Some people just get gratification from betraying and hurting others. It makes them feel superior. Reader comment. Any chance you spent your youth in a fundamentalist Christian school? Original poster, yes. I didn't have any close non-Christian friends until I got to grad school, which was at a major state university, not in the Deep South. So I was really surprised that non-religious people were nice folks, moral, kind, honest, hardworking, etc. It's because all of my Christian leaders had told me that anyone who wasn't a conservative Christian had horns and a tail. Reader comment. Sounds like IFB associated with BJU. I know that scene. Original poster. Most conservative Christians I know hate Bob Jones University. I admit that my circle of friends is limited, mostly to just one of many denominations. They think that Bob Jones U is bigoted and backward. Imagine that. Reader comment, I hope you kept in touch with Fred. He sounds like a nice guy to keep on your side, you know, for reasons. Original poster, Fred and I swap texts or Facebook messages a few times a year. Occasionally a phone call. He called me to congratulate me when I was awarded my doctorate. This is a guy with a high school education, maybe some junior college, not a jealous molecule in his body. He is really a wonderful guy. But with his family obligations, business, he owns a small business and is very popular with customers because he is conscientious and honest. Contrasted with my grad school and now teaching jobs, with my occasional travel, it's difficult for us to find time for much of a relationship. Maybe sometime in the future, our lives will slow down and we can make time for a close friendship. I am sure it will be a good one. You are right about Fred, not his real name. He is a devoted friend and as genuine a person as you will ever meet. He decided to forgive his wife and stay married, by the way. They've been through a lot of counseling to try to restore trust, and Mr. Charming is afraid to come within a parsec of Ms. Fred. So they are trying to make it work. Reader comment, see, this stuff is why I don't want to go back to the Baptist church. I want to go back to church, but I want a different denomination. Original poster, try the Unitarians, sometimes called Unitarian Universalists. They are not Christians, but they have church services with hymns, a sermon, and sometimes even a potluck dinner. I've attended several Unitarian churches over the past 3 to 4 years, and they are all very nice people. Reader comment, my parents tried a Unitarian group when I was a child, but they as a group do not believe anything, and are thus not a refuge for those seeking higher truth. You can't fill a spiritual vacuum with nothing. Original poster. That was my experience with the UUs. Most UU churches are very good for fellowship because they are very warm, accepting, kind people. But if you are looking for spiritual or philosophical guidance, you're going to be disappointed. Reader comment, Mr. Charming is a classic narcissist. Check out Dr. Ramani on YouTube. She does this massive series on how to spot and deal with narcissists. Original poster. I had him figured out right away. The first time I saw him was right after he was hired at Sunday morning worship. He had the look. Imagine the faces of Kenneth Copeland and Jim Bakker grotesquely merged into one, yet still brutally handsome. Life writes its story on your face, and his looked like it had been written by Stephen King and Machiavelli. My first thought was, oh God, please tell me he's not our new youth director. The problem was not that I and most of the youth didn't know what he was. Most of us had him figured out as quickly as I did. The problem was that the church leadership was too stupid to notice. There are two kinds of stupid. The kind where Mother Nature is just not very generous to you, and the kind where you could be smart if you tried, but you choose to be willfully foolish. The church leadership, Board of Deacons, had the second kind. Reader comment. Did everyone at your old church know Mr. Charming was having sex with a woman who was already married? Or was the act of him having sex itself reason enough for shit to hit the fan? Original poster. I don't know who knew about it at Fred's church, i.e. Mr. Charming's church, before he came to work at my church. I do know that Fred told the pastor after Fred's infamous meeting between Mr. Charming and Fred with his 3 friends, described in my post. This became relevant later because the pastor lied to the pastoral search committee at my old church when they were deciding whether to hire Mr. Charming. The pastor actually wrote a nice letter of recommendation for Mr. Charming, telling my church's search committee what a wonderful person Mr. Charming was. Somehow this lying pastor survived, though. I haven't kept up with him, but last I heard, he was still the senior minister at the same church. Reader comment. Reading this story makes me feel so sorry for you growing up in that environment. I hope you are doing better. Original poster. Well, my PhD in archaeology cured me from Slavish addiction to biblical literalism. I'm now very happily agnostic. Although I do like some of Jesus' sayings like, love your neighbor, and I hope that Christians will try it someday. It will be a new experience for them. Reader comment. So did anyone apologize for the nasty rumors or otherwise acknowledge it was pure and utter bullshit? Original poster, not one apology. One good thing came out of this though. It showed me who my friends were. My friends didn't believe any of the rumors and they're still my friends today. The rest of my friends never were my friend. I was their friend, but they weren't my friend. And this whole sad situation got them to clearly show everyone what kind of people they were. Reader comment. What happened with Fred and his wife? Did they stay married? Original poster. Fred, not his real name, decided to forgive his wife and stay married. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. Forgiveness is given, trust is earned. Trust, once broken, is very difficult to restore. They've been through a lot of counseling to try to restore trust, so they are trying to make it work. Reader comment. I'm really happy for you, mainly that you didn't become a Baptist.